We are back now on the show to continue looking over some of the games from this past week in Week 8 and talking about some of the events that occurred in some of these pretty massive games. Because looking at this game now, the Texans and the Indianapolis Colts, Houston and Indy met for the second time on Sunday, and again, same result as the first time. Houston won in the same way by narrow margins. This time Houston won 23-20 to stay on top of the AFC South, and now they go to 6-2, sole possession of the division, while the Indianapolis Colts drop to 4-4. Looking at both of these games and how close the Colts played the Texans, who everybody, including myself, are very high on, and they have all the talent. They are looked upon as the favorite to not only win this division, but be one of the major contenders. The Colts have played them very well, so to kind of harp on my point before, relating it to the Dolphins, the Colts, they're not a bad team. They're 4-4. I think the record's a little bit unfair. I'm sure they'd love the Jaguars game back, but they are what they are right now. But they're by far not a bad team. So because of that, you look at these two contests over Week 1 and now just this past week between the Texans and the Colts. They both games have been decided by a total of 5 points. It was 29-27 in Week 1 in Indy, and this time the game was only decided by 3 points. So they've been right there. They've been playing the Colts. They've been playing up to the Texans, their competition. So it is good to see by the Colts, but still, looking at this game a little bit more, Joe Mixon was a big factor in this one once again, because you look at his Week 1 performance against the Colts, and in Week 1, he had 30 carries for 159 yards and a touchdown. And now this time around, similarly, he had such a big impact. He had 25 carries, 102 yards, and a touchdown. He's the first player in NFL history to have at least 100 yards rushing and a touchdown rushing as well in 4 of his first 5 games with a new team. So, I think it's fair to say that the acquisition of Joe Mixon has been one of, if not the most important, certainly for the Texans, but one of the most impactful ones for just the entire NFL, for all the transactions and additions we've seen. He's been everything that the Texans would have wanted and more. So great for the Texans to have him, because like we said on the teaser a little bit, how the Colts now they're dealing with some losses, because it was announced today that Stephon Diggs officially has torn his ACL, and in a moment where the Texans are not trying to get by because they have good players, but they're without Nico Collins. They were without Joe Mixon for a while, so you were looking to get back to the point where everybody was back together again. We could see this Texans offense for what it really was, and now you get this news on Tuesday to really put a damper in everything. Because obviously Stephon's not coming back this year, and Nico should be out at least one more week, if not 2, before he's back. So the Texans have now, from what was this high-powered, fully stacked-up offense, now they're without Stephon. And, Nico and Tank were, I'm assuming, the original plan, right, after their rookie years to come in and, have a bigger role. Obviously, with Stephon Diggs coming in, you have to involve him. So Tank Dell hasn't really been as involved as I would have liked or expected, but maybe now this is an opportunity for him. He scored in this game as well, and this could be yet another opening for him to kind of step into this limelight and take that jump like Nico Collins did just last year. I'm still waiting for that jump from Tank Dell, so hopefully he could take advantage of this opportunity now to get more targets, but certainly a bad piece of news for the Texans, for Stephon Diggs too, which he seemed uber motivated this year to kind of go out there and prove a point on a new team, and kind of be on a really good contending team also, right? But unfortunately, he tears his ACL, so he will not be back for the Texans. And also, how that affects free agency a little bit, because he isn't guaranteed to stay there. So how that all plans out will be something, to talk about later on. But On this game and looking at the performances, CJ Stroud had a bounce back game from last week where he only threw for like 86 yards. This time he threw for 285, a touchdown, and had a quarterback rating of 99. Joe Mixon, I already read out his stats. He had an exceptional game. Stephon Diggs led all receivers with 5 receptions and 81 yards. Tank Dell had the touchdown in the game, 4 receptions for 35 yards as well. Whereas the Colts, for as tight as the game was, they had some pretty good showings. Jonathan Taylor coming back off an injury, he had an amazing game, 20 yards, or excuse me, 20 carries, 105 yards, and a touchdown. Josh Downs had a good game, 4 receptions, 109 yards, and a touchdown for him as well. So the Colts, both defenses too, playing a big part in the result overall. So from the statistical standpoint, there wasn't anything that really stood out that you're thinking, oh, like this was the reason that they lost. But looking at the moments in this game and the scenarios and just what happened in this game overall, looking at it in the first half, there was a very tight contested game between both of them just responding to one another. That seemed to be the theme of the first half because the one team scored a field goal, the other team answered. It was 3-3. Then Indianapolis scored a touchdown to Josh Downs. It was 10-3, but Houston again answered and made it 10-10 with a touchdown from Joe Mixon. And after that, to kind of follow off on this mirroring pattern, there were 6 straight punts combined by both of these teams after the score was 10-10. And one of the biggest plays, in my opinion, that occurred after, we got this period where both teams are struggling, both offenses can't get anything going. We see 6 straight punts by both of these teams. The biggest play came to me right before halftime when Anthony Richardson faced a third down and 3 or 4, if I'm not mistaken. And there was around like 20 to 25 seconds left at this point, if I'm not mistaken. And on 3rd and 3, he was backed up pretty much into his own red zone, right? He was nowhere near a safe spot for him to throw a pass, but that was the play that was called. He, I'm sure, makes a bad read on where he wants to go with the football, and instead of hitting Michael Pittman, or actually Josh Downs, I believe, on a short little, choice route over to the right side, he throws it directly to Jalen Petrie, the Texans safety, who was just standing right there, and they return it a couple yards, and now, immediately, right before halftime, the Texans are in fantastic position to score a touchdown or at least get some points back, and that's exactly what they do, because off of that turnover, with 17 seconds left, Houston gets a touchdown to go up 17-7, a touchdown scored by Tank Dell, and in a spot where the Colts were going to go into halftime pretty much tied, no one was feeling great, they make such a big error, not only to highlight Anthony Richardson, but to just really put your team in a questionable and a precarious spot, because nothing's going to be lost going into halftime 10-10, right? You're just going to regroup, reanalyze everything, it's even. But by making that mistake on a 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4 to throw the ball in that scenario, I feel like there's more risk than reward in that snenario. So I don't know, if Shane Steichen called the play or if it was just Anthony Richardson just throwing it anyway, knowing that it was a bad read. Regardless of the fact, it made a big impact because now you go into halftime losing by 7 points instead of being even. And in the second half, it got a little bit more interesting. Indianapolis made it real close again with a touchdown from Jonathan Taylor. And the score at that point, after that touchdown, was 20-23. And still, the Colts were losing. They had a great chance when they recovered that fumble in the Texans drive where they were already in the Colts red zone. They fumbled the ball away. They recovered it. The Colts defense recovered it, and they had a chance there not only to take away points from the Texans, but to get some back. But they didn't do anything with it. But even still, the the Colts had a chance in this game to only need a field goal because they forced the Texans to punt again. So Indianapolis was going to have the ball last. They only needed a field goal, and there were still 54 seconds left. But ultimately, nothing really came about this drive, and they even couldn't get the Hail Mary off because I believe it was Danielle Hunter who came in and sacked Anthony Richardson again, or it was somebody getting to him before he can unload the Hail Mary ball. So yeah, the Colts lose a pretty big game here, 23-20, and Anthony Richardson's struggles do kind of shine a little bit here because at one point in the first half, I think he was like 2 for 15 or something like that, which, you know, we're not going to get into the whole Anthony Richardson situation on whether or not, he's looking like a bust or anything like that. I think it's still way too early. He's only played still like a handful of games in his rookie year, which he missed most of, and even into this year as well. The Colts drafted him for his high upside, his potential, right? So, it's logical to think that you need to play him for him to get this experience, get better, and learn off of things like that. But also, with the news that just broke today about Joe Flacco now starting, I believe that could be something that does benefit Anthony Richardson because he hasn't really been playing lights out this season, and there has been some frustrations, especially with Joe Flacco, just sitting there. And the struggles that he showed in the first half. I don't hate this move, and it kind of goes off of the fact that we saw something very peculiar happen for the Indianapolis Colts and for Anthony Richardson specifically in the third quarter of this game that I think aided a little bit in making this decision for the Colts. And that actually leads me into the last segment of today's show, that peculiar moment that we saw by Anthony Richardson in that third quarter where he essentially tapped himself out of the game for whatever reason. If you guys weren't aware of it, we're going to touch on it. I'll give you my thoughts on it, and also we're going to determine if it's something that is significant enough to kind of make this a story out of, or whether or not people are just overblowing this situation. So we're going to answer that question. What did Anthony Richardson do that has everybody talking? We're going to answer that question when we return in just a few seconds.